Thank you, Chris. I like the fact that some of the other speakers have recognized our law enforcement. We have several members of MCSO that are here today, and other law enforcement members. And the firefighters are mentioned a lot when people talk about 9/11. Of course, we lost 343 of our brother and sister firefighters that morning. But let us not forget that New York City Police Department and the Port Authority Police Department also lost over 70 members that morning. So let's please remember their sacrifice also. My older brother can tell you exactly where he was and what he was doing on the morning of November 22nd, 1963. He was in his school cafeteria, and there was a television that was mounted on the wall, and he watched as Walter Cronkite announced that President John F. Kennedy had been shot in Dallas, Texas. He remembers that clearly as if it happened yesterday. And that's what happens when we find ourselves faced with something that's so tragic and so shocking and so monumental that we know immediately that our lives have taken a sudden turn and will be forever changed. We tend to remember exactly where we were and what we were doing. Some of you here today may remember exactly where you were and what you were doing when you heard that the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, or when you heard that the Space Shuttle Challenger had exploded in the skies above Florida. For many of us, that awful memory is going to be September 11th in 2001. People remember the images they saw that day a little differently. No two people remember it the same. It may be intensely personal to you because you may have lived in New York City, or Arlington, Virginia, or Shanksville, Pennsylvania. You may have friends or family that live there, or you may have known someone deeply affected, or perhaps you even have a loved one that died that day. I wasn't sure of a whole lot that day, but there were two things that I did know for certain. When I saw the images of the World Trade Center collapsing, the first thing that came to my mind, and I mean the very first thing, was that I knew what the street below looked like. I knew that it was crowded with fire engines and with hose lines snaking every which way, and there wasn't a doubt in my mind that we had lost brother and sister firefighters. You see, in the fire service, we aren't just co-workers or colleagues. It doesn't matter where you come from or what fire department you work for. We're all brothers and sisters. You go back and watch the news footage of the New York City firefighters walking into the World Trade Center with their eyes on the burning towers. When you watch that footage, I want you to look into their faces. They knew. They knew what was going to happen. Any professional firefighter could have looked at those buildings and told you what was going to happen, and they knew. But they had a job to do. You see, when you fight a fire, you put water between the fire and the people that are endangered by it. And they knew they had to put hose lines between the fire and the means of egress, so they would give as many people as possible a chance to get out of those buildings. But they knew that there was a very good chance that they weren't going to make it out. And they knew that they were never going to go home to their families again, but they went anyway. Every September, the family of Stephen Siller, a New York City firefighter, holds a charity run. It starts in Brooklyn, it goes through Battery Park Tunnel, and it ends near Ground Zero. Stephen couldn't get through the traffic to get into Manhattan on the morning of September 11th, so he parked his car and he ran. He ran 3 miles to the World Trade Center because he knew that he was needed there. Stephen Siller died at the World Trade Center that day. When you participate in the charity run that his family put together, you run the same route that Stephen took, and when you go through the Battery Park Tunnel, standing at attention along both sides of the road are 343 New York City firefighters holding American flags in honor of the 343 firefighters that died. Why am I telling you all this? Because you may not have known anyone that was there on September 11th. You may not agree with why we went to war afterward, and that's fine. But events like this are about remembering and honoring people. Kind of like what the Major said just a few minutes ago. No matter what you think should have been done or not done since that day, today is about remembering and honoring people. There's been a lot of divisiveness since then, and it's time for us to come together as a nation once again. That being said, I'm going to close with some words from Abraham Lincoln, which I thought were particularly fitting for a day like this. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead should not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from the earth.